The car smelled like Dad's aftershave and something else. Something like rain on hot pavement. I'd always liked that smell, but today it felt thick in my throat. I traced a smiley face on the foggy window with my finger, but it wasn't a very good one. The mouth part was wobbly. Outside the trees were a blurry green wall rushing past us so fast it made my tummy do a little flip-flop. Dad was quiet. He was usually quiet, but this was a different kind of quiet. It was heavy. His knuckles were white where he held the steering wheel, and his eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, but not to look at me. He was looking at the road behind us as if he expected someone to be there. I had asked him where we were going an hour ago. He just said, "To your Uncle Thomas's place, Emily, for a visit." I liked Uncle Thomas. He had a big laugh that shook his whole body, and he always had lemon drops in a glass jar on his coffee table. But we usually only saw him on holidays. This was just a regular Tuesday. I was still wearing my school shoes. "Is Mom meeting us there?" I asked, kicking my feet against the back of his seat. It made a soft, thumping sound. He flinched just a little. "Stop that, sweetie." And no, Mom's busy. That was another strange thing. Mom was always busy. She was a nurse, but she wasn't this kind of busy. Not Tuesday afternoon drive busy. Dad's voice sounded stretched, like a rubber band pulled too tight. I stopped kicking and went back to my wobbly smiley face on the window. We turned onto a road I didn't know, full of cracks and with tall, weedy-looking flowers growing on the side. Uncle Thomas's house was at the very end, small and white with a blue door. It looked lonely. As Dad pulled the car into the gravel driveway, the crunching sound was the loudest thing I had heard in an hour. He turned off the engine, and the silence that followed was even louder. For a long moment, we just sat there. I could hear a bird chirping somewhere, and my own breathing. "All right," Dad said, his voice finally coming out like a sigh. He turned around to look at me, and he tried to smile, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. His looked tired. So tired. "Here we are." "Where's my bag?" I asked, looking in the back. My little pink backpack with my pajamas and my favorite book wasn't there. Neither was my overnight bag. We didn't pack anything. Dad's smile disappeared completely. He swallowed hard, and his Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. "You won't need it right away, sweetie. Your uncle will have everything you need." That didn't make any sense. Uncle Thomas didn't have my pajamas with the dancing cats on them. He didn't have my toothbrush. Before I could ask another question, Dad was out of the car. I opened my door and slid out, my sneakers crunching on the same gravel. The air smelled different here, like cut grass and dirt. Uncle Thomas was already standing on the porch, wiping his hands on a towel. He wasn't doing his big, shaky laugh. He just looked at Dad, then at me, with a look on his face I didn't understand. It was sad, but also something else. Dad walked up to him, and they spoke in low voices I couldn't hear. I stood by the car, feeling small. I hugged myself, even though it wasn't cold. I watched Uncle Thomas nod slowly. He looked over at me and gave me a small, tight smile that was no better than Dad's. Then Dad walked back to me. He crouched down so his face was level with mine. He smelled like the car and sad coffee. "Listen to me, Emily," he said, and his voice was shaky now. He put his hands on my shoulders. "You're going to stay here with Uncle Thomas for a little while, okay?" The word little while felt stretchy and weird. "But why? I have school tomorrow." His eyes got shiny. I thought he was going to cry. This is just for the best, sweetie. It's better for everyone." Better for who? My own voice was starting to feel wobbly, like my window drawing. "I want to go home." "This will be your home for now," he whispered, and his hands squeezed my shoulders a little too tight. He leaned in and gave me a quick, scratchy kiss on my forehead. It didn't feel like a real kiss. It felt like a goodbye. He stood up before I could say anything else. He didn't look at me again. He just walked to his car, got in, and started the engine. I stood there, frozen, watching him. Uncle Thomas came down the steps and put a hand gently on my back. I watched the car back out of the driveway. I watched it turn onto the cracked road. I watched it get smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny dark spot. And then it was gone. The only sounds were the bird chirping again and the quiet hum of the empty road. I was standing in front of my uncle's house, in my school shoes, without a single bag, and my dad was gone. The heavy quiet from the car wasn't in the car anymore. It was inside me. Uncle Thomas's hand stayed on my back, a warm, heavy weight that was meant to be comforting, but only made me feel more fragile. "Come on inside, Emily," he said, his voice much softer than the booming laugh I remembered. "Let's get you something to drink. Some lemonade?" I shook my head. my eyes still fixed on the empty spot on the road where Dad's car had vanished. I felt if I stared hard enough, I could make it reappear. I could rewind the last 5 minutes just by wishing it, but the road stayed empty. Okay then, let's just go inside, he said gently, giving my shoulder a little squeeze. I let him guide me up the wooden steps and through the blue door. The inside of his house smelled clean, like lemons and old books. It was very tidy. There were no shoes kicked off by the door, no mail piled on the little table in the hall. My house always had shoes by the door and a messy pile of mail. A floorboard creaked under my feet as I stepped into the living room. In the silence, it sounded like a shout. The glass jar of lemon drops was on the coffee table, just like I remembered. It was full. I wondered how long they had been sitting there. You can sit on the sofa if you like, Uncle Thomas said, pointing to a long gray couch. It looked brand new, with no dents in the cushions. At home, the sofa had a permanent dent on the right side, where Dad always sat to watch TV. I didn't want to sit. I wanted to stand by the window and watch the road. So I did. I pressed my nose against the cool glass and looked out, past the neat little lawn, to the empty, cracked road. Maybe he just went to get gas. Maybe he forgot something and would be right back. My brain kept making up little stories, each one a tiny bubble of hope that burst as soon as it formed. Behind me, I heard Uncle Thomas sigh. It was a tired sound, like Dad's sigh in the car. Emily, he started. His voice was heavy. I know this is confusing. I turned around. He was standing in the middle of the room looking lost. He wasn't used to having a kid here. He said it was better for everyone, I said, my voice small. Who is everyone? Is it me? Am I the one it's better for? His face crumpled a little. Oh, sweetie, no, this isn't your fault. Nothing is your fault. He walked over and sat on the arm of the sofa, so he was a little closer to my height. Your mom and dad, they have some grown-up things to figure out, and they just need some time to do it. So, you're going to be my special guest for a little while. My VIP. He was trying to be cheerful, but his eyes were still sad. A little while. That stretchy, weird phrase again. But my things are at home, my book is there, and my pajamas. The thought of my dancing cat pajamas made a lump form in my throat. We'll get you new things tomorrow, he promised. We'll go to the store. You can pick out anything you want. A new toothbrush, new pajamas, anything. I didn't want new pajamas. I wanted my pajamas. The ones Mom bought me. The ones that smelled like home. Tears started to prickle at the back of my eyes, hot and sharp. I squeezed them shut. I wouldn't cry. Dad had said this was for the best, and maybe if I cried, I'd be making it worse. Maybe if I was a very, very good girl, he would come back sooner. Okay, I whispered, opening my eyes again. Uncle Thomas looked relieved. Okay, he repeated. Good. You must be tired. It's been a long day. Let me show you your room. He led me down a short hallway to a door at the end. The room was simple, with a bed, a small wooden desk, and a window that looked out into the backyard. The bed was covered with a quilt that had little blue flowers on it. It was a nice room, I guess. But it wasn't my room. My room had glow-in-the-dark stars stuck on the ceiling. My room had a poster of a kitten hanging from a tree branch that said, "Hang in there." My room had a messy pile of drawings on the desk. This room had nothing of me in it. It was like a room in a hotel. The bathroom is just next door, he said, pointing. And, well, for tonight. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a folded t-shirt. It was a plain white one. This might be a little big, but it should work for pajamas. I took it from him. The cotton was soft, but it was just a shirt. It didn't have any dancing cats on it. Thank you, I mumbled. You try and get some sleep, okay? If you need anything at all, my room is just at the other end of the hall. Just call out. He stood in the doorway for a second, then gave me another one of those small, tight smiles, and pulled the door almost closed, leaving a little crack of light from the hallway. I changed into the big t-shirt. It came down to my knees. I climbed into the bed. The sheets were crisp and cool, and they smelled like Uncle Thomas's house, not like my bed at home. I lay on my back, staring up at the plain white ceiling. There were no stars here. I listened to the sounds of the house. A floorboard creaked again. The refrigerator hummed. They were lonely sounds. I waited for the sound of Dad's car coming back down the gravel driveway, but the only thing I heard was the sound of my own quiet breathing in the dark. I woke up because the sun was too bright. It was streaming through the window, making a bright square on the flowery quilt. For a second, just one blurry, sleepy second, I didn't know where I was. The ceiling was too low and it was the wrong color. Then it all came rushing back, like cold water. Dad's car. The gravel driveway. The heavy quiet. I was at Uncle Thomas's house. I sat up in the big t-shirt. My school clothes were in a neat, sad pile on the little wooden desk. It was Wednesday. I should be getting ready for school. Mrs. Davison was going to read the next chapter of our book today. I wondered if my friends would ask where I was. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. I could hear noises from the kitchen, the clink of a spoon against a bowl, the rumble of a coffee maker. They were morning sounds, but they weren't my morning sounds. At home, the morning was filled with the sound of the TV news, Mom's hairdryer, and Dad's loud yawns. My stomach felt like it was full of jumpy frogs. I didn't want to leave the room. This room was a stranger, but the rest of the house was even stranger. I stayed in bed, pulling my knees up to my chest and waited. After a few minutes, there was a soft knock on the door. "Emily?" Uncle Thomas's voice came through the wood. "You awake in there?" "Yes," I said, my voice crackly from sleep. The door opened a little bit. "Morning. I made some pancakes if you're hungry." I didn't feel hungry, but I knew saying no was a bad guest thing to do. So I slid out of bed. "Okay." In the kitchen, a plate of pancakes sat on the small wooden table. They were perfectly round, not like the lopsided ones Dad made that I loved. There was a bottle of syrup and a glass of orange juice next to them. Uncle Thomas was leaning against the counter, holding a mug. "You can just leave your clothes from yesterday on the desk. We'll go to the store after breakfast and get you all sorted out," he said, trying to sound cheerful. I sat down and poked a pancake with my fork. "Can I call Mom first?" I asked, looking at the syrup bottle instead of him. He was quiet for a moment. I heard him take a sip of his coffee. I don't think that's a good idea right now, kiddo. Like I said, they're busy. They need some space." "But she'll be worried," I insisted, a little bubble of frustration starting to form in my chest. "She doesn't know where I am." "She knows you're with me," he said, his voice firm but still gentle. "She knows you're safe, Emily. That's the most important thing. Let's just let them have their time, okay? Now eat your pancakes. We have a big day of shopping." He was using that voice, the one grown-ups use when they don't want to answer any more questions, the end of discussion voice. So I cut a small piece of pancake and put it in my mouth. It tasted like nothing. The shopping trip was even weirder. The store was big and bright and loud, full of people who were living their normal Wednesdays. We went to the kids' section. "All right," Uncle Thomas said, gesturing at the racks of clothes. "Knock yourself out. Pick whatever you want." I walked through the aisles, touching the soft fabrics. There were t-shirts with sparkly unicorns and dresses with ruffles. There were pajamas with cartoon characters I liked, but I didn't want them. Picking out a new nightgown felt like cheating on my dancing cats. It felt like agreeing that I wasn't going home. I ended up pulling a plain blue t-shirt and a pair of gray leggings off a rack. Then I found a set of plain white pajamas. No pictures, no patterns, just plain. Uncle Thomas looked at the little pile in my arms. "Is that all? Are you sure you don't want that one with the singing dog on it?" He pointed to a bright pink shirt. I shook my head. "I like plain things." He didn't push it. We bought a toothbrush, a hairbrush, socks, and underwear. The whole time, I felt like I was watching someone else live my life. It was a strange, floaty feeling. We walked back to the car in the big parking lot, the plastic bags rustling with all my new empty stuff. Back at the house, I put everything away in the drawers of the dresser. The clothes didn't have the familiar soft smell of my laundry detergent from home. They smelled like the store, like plastic and newness. I changed into the blue t-shirt and gray leggings. I felt like I was in a costume. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting at the little desk in my room, looking out the window at the backyard. There was a big oak tree and a bird feeder. It was a nice backyard, but I kept thinking about my own backyard, about the lumpy patch of grass where Dad and I tried to plant tomatoes last year. I kept thinking of his words, repeating over and over in my head. "This is better for everyone." How? How was this better? Better for him because he didn't have me asking questions? Better for Mom because she could be busy without me? It wasn't better for me. Not at all. A terrible thought, cold and sharp, poked at my mind. Maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I had been bad, and this was my punishment. But I couldn't think of what it was. I had gotten a gold star on my spelling test last week. I always ate my vegetables, even the peas. A knot of confusion and fear tightened in my stomach. I was a good girl, wasn't I? The first few days at Uncle Thomas's house were all the same color. A quiet, washed-out gray. Thursday felt like Wednesday, and Friday felt like Thursday. I learned the rhythm of his quiet house. The way the floorboard by the bathroom always creaked in the morning. The way the clock in the living room ticked. a slow and steady sound that measured out the empty hours. We ate our meals at the small kitchen table. Uncle Thomas would ask me about my day, but there was nothing to tell. My day was watching the bird feeder in the backyard. My day was tracing the patterns on the flowery quilt. He would try to tell me about his work. He fixed computers, using simple words he thought I would understand. But his voice would trail off, and we'd finish our meal in that familiar, heavy silence. On Friday afternoon, he sat down across from me at the table. He had a piece of paper and a pen. "Emily," he began, and I knew by his tone that this was going to be another one of those conversations, the kind that made my stomach feel like a fist. "We need to talk about school." I looked up from the drawing I was making on a napkin. It was a picture of my house, the real one. "I have school," I said, "with Mrs. Davison." He winced, just a little, like the word home was a bright light he had to squint at. "I know, sweetie, but you can't just not go to school. So on Monday, we're going to go to the school down the street here and get you registered. It's a very nice school. They have a big playground." The napkin ripped under my crayon. A big blue tear went right through the roof of my house. "No," I said, the word coming out louder than I expected. "I don't want a new school. I want my school. My friends are there. Billy Henderson owes me a pencil. I have to go back." "You will, eventually," he said, and the word hung in the air, stretchy and thin. "This is just for right now, Emily, so you don't fall behind. It'll be fun. You'll make new friends." I stared at him, my chest feeling tight. He didn't get it. He didn't get it at all. This wasn't about falling behind in math. This was about him saying school here, and it sounding like home here. Every new thing he gave me, the plain pajamas, the new toothbrush, and now this new school, felt like another brick being placed in a wall between me and my real life. "I don't want new friends," I whispered, pushing the ruined napkin drawing away. The sad look was back in his eyes. He sighed that same tired sigh. "Just give it a try, Emily. For me, okay?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the rip in my paper house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling with no stars. The house was completely silent. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only person awake in the whole world. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold on the wooden floor. The little crack of light was still coming from under my door. I pushed it open and tiptoed into the hallway. The phone was on a small table by the living room, an old-fashioned one with buttons. I knew Mom's number. I had practiced it with her 100 times, just in case of emergencies. My heart started to beat fast, a tiny drum in my chest. Is this an emergency? I thought. It felt like one. My fingers were shaking as I crept towards it. The moonlight coming through the big window made the phone look pale and ghostly. I reached out a hand, my fingertips hovering over the cool plastic buttons. I could just press them. 3, 4, 7. I could hear her voice. I could tell her I wanted to come home. I could ask her why Dad left me here. But then I thought of Uncle Thomas's words. They need some space. What if I called and Mom got mad? What if this was all a test, to see if I could be a good girl and wait patiently? What if calling was the wrong thing to do? The thing that would make them not want me to come home at all? The fear was colder and sharper than the hope. I pulled my hand back like the phone was hot. I turned and tiptoed back to my room, the one with the wrong ceiling and the wrong smells, and climbed back into the wrong bed. I curled into a tight ball under the covers, and for the first time since Dad's car disappeared down the road, I cried. It wasn't loud. It was a secret, silent kind of crying, the tears just rolling down my face and soaking into the crisp, strange pillow. I cried for my dancing cat pajamas, and for Mrs. Davison's story, and for the lopsided pancakes Dad used to make. I cried because I didn't understand, and because I was more lonely than I had ever been in my whole life. Monday morning arrived with a gray, drizzly sky that matched how I felt inside. The new clothes felt stiff. The new backpack was empty except for a single notebook and a pencil, and the new school looked huge and scary. Uncle Thomas walked me to the front office. The air inside smelled of floor polish and chalk dust. It was the right smell for a school, but it felt all wrong. A lady with a bright fake smile showed me to my new classroom. When I walked in, 20 strange faces turned to look at me. The teacher, a woman named Mrs. Gable, introduced me as our new student, Emily. I felt my cheeks get hot. I found an empty desk at the back and spent the entire morning staring at the back of the head of the girl in front of me, wishing I could become invisible. At recess, I stood by the wall, watching the other kids run and shout on the big playground Uncle Thomas had told me about. It was big, but it just looked like a wide, empty space to feel lonely in. A girl with bright red glasses bounced a ball near me. She stopped and asked, Do you want to play? I just shook my head, and she shrugged and bounced away. I didn't want to play. Playing felt like a betrayal. When Uncle Thomas picked me up that afternoon, he asked, "So, how was it? Did you make any friends?" "It was okay," I lied, looking out the window. I didn't want to tell him that the only conversation I'd had was to say no. That evening, something changed. I was in my room, trying to draw the kitten from my "Hang in there" poster from memory, when the phone rang. I heard Uncle Thomas's low voice from the living room. Usually he was quiet on the phone, but this time his voice was different. It was sharper. I crept to my door and listened. I couldn't hear all the words, just pieces. "No, she's right here. She's fine." An absolute mess. There was a long pause. Then I heard him say, very clearly, his voice strained, "Well, what did you expect me to tell her? You can't just drop a child off like she's a piece of luggage. She needs to know." "No, that's not fair to her. It's not her fault she got sick." Sick. The word echoed in the hallway. It echoed inside my head. It's not her fault she got sick. He wasn't talking about me. He couldn't be. I hadn't been sick. A new, confusing picture started to form in my mind. A picture where Mom wasn't just busy. A picture where Dad wasn't just needing space. A picture where something was wrong, something big and scary that had nothing to do with me being a bad kid. I heard him hang up the phone. A few moments later, he knocked on my door. When he came in, he didn't have his usual tired, trying to be cheerful smile. He just looked at me, and his eyes were full of a deep, real sadness. He sat on the edge of my bed, not on top of the covers, but right there with me. "That was your dad," he said softly. I just nodded, holding my crayon tightly. He took a deep breath. "Emily, there's something I should have told you. The real reason you're here. Your mom is sick. She's in the hospital. Your dad, he's trying to take care of everything, and he's not doing a very good job of it. He's overwhelmed." The knot of fear and confusion that had been sitting in my stomach for days didn't disappear, but it changed. It loosened, just a little. "Is she going to be okay?" I whispered. "We hope so," he said. And I knew he was telling me the truth. They're doing everything they can. But it's not something you can fix by being a good girl. And it's not a punishment for anything you've done. It's just a terrible grown-up thing that happened. And your dad saying it was better for everyone. I think he was just trying to convince himself. He made a mistake leaving you like that. A big one. He looked at the plain white ceiling. "No stars in here, huh?" I shook my head. "Come here," he said, leading me to the window. The rain had stopped and a few stars were poking through the clouds. He pointed. "See that one? The really bright one? That's the North Star. Sailors used to use it to find their way home." We stood there for a long time just looking at the star. It wasn't a ceiling full of glowing plastic, but it was real. It was something to look for. It wasn't home, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe, someday, I could find my way back. The quiet in the house was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. It was just quiet. And in that quiet, a tiny, fragile piece of hope began to grow.